We're waiting to go live. We're just waiting for YouTube to give me the thing and it says we're live. Welcome to Spoiler Free Wrestling, everyone. We are doing a live show and we are going to go over the results from Slammiversary last night for Impact Wrestling. So if you haven't yet had a chance to check out Slammiversary and you'd like to, probably turn this off now, go give that a watch, and go check out this live stream when you get back. What's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. Impact Wrestling put on a great pay-per-view last night. Pay-per-views over the last 18 months for Impact Wrestling have been fantastic. That's not what they have to worry about. They've had an unfortunate deal with a TV station, with the Pursuit channel. Impact Wrestling has been putting together some great TV shows, but unfortunately, if you're relying on the Pursuit channel to see them, you have had some poor luck in 2019. Also today on this live stream, we are going to go over the results from the first night of the G1 Climax tournament. That was also held in Dallas on Saturday night. It was at a different arena, obviously. We'll go over that, and then we'll go over some of the breaking news tonight, and then Raw tonight. Again, the second Raw of the Paul Heyman era, and a couple of things have been announced for Raw tonight. But let's start off with Slammiversary. Slammiversary was held last night in Gilley's, Dallas, and that's a club in Dallas, Texas. Ring of Honor also runs that venue quite a bit. They were sold out. How many people I'm not sure how many people Gilley's holds. I think it's only a few hundred. Let's just take a look at Gilley's on Cage Match. Actually, no, forget that. Anyway, it's a venue in Dallas. It holds a few hundred. This is pretty typical for the venues that Ring of Honor has been running as of late. They've been running all the typical sort of lower tiered wrestling venues. So you've got the 2300 Arena in Philadelphia. It's probably the most famous. Rebel Nightclub in Toronto, that's a couple thousand. And so kind of on the same level as Ring of Honor, MLW. MLW, Ring of Honor, and Impact are all sort of running the same sized shows. All three promotions have shown that in some locations they can get a few thousand to a show. MLW has sold out Chicago's Sakura Stadium a few times. Impact Wrestling on their pay-per-views can draw a couple thousand, and Ring of Honor for their bigger shows can do that as well, although their attendance has certainly decreased this year from last year, although it's actually really just gone back to their pre-elite sort of levels. They're back in sort of the smaller venues that they ran before the elite really took off in terms of popularity. But let's start off with Impact Wrestling. Now, over the last 18 months, I've been a fan of Impact's. And in part, they've run a bunch of shows from Toronto. I've seen all their pay-per-views that they've done in the... Well, when I say 18 months, 19 months, actually. I'm going back to when Don Callis, Scott D'Amore, and who's the third guy? Ed Nordholm became the new management team. And so basically this is Impact Wrestling in the post-TNA, post-Dixie Carter era. And this has been, there's only been a few people in history who have been in charge of TNA Wrestling. You had Jeff Jarrett. You had Jarrett and Russo. Then you had Bischoff and Hogan were in there for a bit with Russo. And I'm going to turn up this light here. Maybe the light will be a little bit better. So Bischoff and Russo were in there for a bit. Then Dixie Carter was running the whole show. And now you've got Ed Nordholm, Don Callis, and Scott D'Amore. And it has been a completely different Impact Wrestling in the last year and a half. Now, admittedly, I had fallen off of watching Impact. I think a lot of people did. Now looking at it, it's too dark in here. I'm putting the light back on. there had been some stuff that had happened in TNA wrestling that was fine. All that Matt Hardy, Broken Hardy saga, that stuff was great. The Knockouts division has always been one of the strongest women's divisions in professional wrestling. It's certainly no different now, but the Knockouts division has always been strong because when women's wrestling really hit a lull in the 2000s, and I say lull because women's wrestling has had some incredibly profitable periods, and you can go all the way back to Mildred Burke, and then you go to Trish and Lita, and then just in the 2000s, it seemed like all WWE cared about was having women wrestlers who could get into Playboy. And Gail Kim was trying to break out of the mold in that thing. Well, I mean, like Gail Kim, obviously she looks like a WWE diva, but she wrestles like a good... she doesn't wrestle like a WWE diva does. And certainly we found out last night Tessa Blanchard doesn't wrestle like a WWE diva. But for a long time, women's wrestling in WWE, it was this, can we get a Playboy centerfold type of division, whereas TNA was running a good women's division. But anyway, this new Impact with Don Callis at the helm, it's a new promotion. And I've treated it like a new promotion because it's new people at the helm. It's got a different approach, clearly. Some things are still the same. Some personnel are still there. Josh Matthews is still there. Certain elements of the production are the same. So there's a lot that's still the same about Impact. But when you look at their creative, it's really changed a lot since January 2018. And their pay-per-views in particular have been very well reviewed. I've been able to attend 2 of the pay-per-views in this era. I was at Slammiversary last year, which was one of the first pay-per-views in this new era. It had Moose versus Austin Aries for the Impact World Championship. And I attended the tapings after that. I attended Rebellion, which was a few months ago, and saw Tessa Blanchard versus Gail Kim, Brian Cage versus Johnny Impact. I thought Rebellion was a great show. I really thought Slammiversary last year was a great show, and this year you had Pentagon versus Sami Callihan and all these things, but I thought Rebellion was an even better show. So, and that's just how it's been for Impact Wrestling over the last year and a half. They've been throwing out these killer pay-per-views, which have been almost universally well-reviewed. Like, they've been great. Like, Impact Wrestling pay-per-views are some of the best wrestling shows that have happened in the last year and a half. Again, I'm a little bit biased because their head office is a few streetcar stops from here. Like, it's not far, so they do a lot of shows in Toronto. So I'm a little bit biased. They also employ a lot of Toronto area wrestlers. Like, Josh Alexander and Ethan Page were career indie guys around here, and really this break they're getting as the North and Impact Wrestling has been fantastic for them. Josh Alexander actually he was not allowed into the United States, which is a problem a lot of Canadian wrestlers run into. So this has been great for him. They've gotten him a visa, so now he can get into the States. So it's been a really solid year and a half. Only they haven't really been rewarded for it like I think their fan base and I'm sure their front office would wish they'd have been. The first thing that you really think of about Impact Wrestling in 2019, unfortunately, is not these killer shows that they've been putting together. It's the deal with the Pursuit channel or the Pursuit network. And there was an issue where the show was listed as 4 half-hour episodes originally, and they had to get that fixed. Then they forgot to come back from commercial break one episode, which was during a Michael Elgin Rich Swann match, which was really well reviewed. And then, finally, they just played the wrong episode of Impact one week as well. There have been rumors that Impact Wrestling has been talking to different networks. I heard Access TV was out there. Nothing's been announced. Should should be, well, it is notable that they were in Texas this whole weekend. Access TV's head office in Dallas, owner Mark Cuban's there. So it's not certain if Impact Wrestling was in Texas for strategic reasons this weekend. Maybe they wanted to bring some representatives from Access to their show. Don't know. But let's run down the show that they had in Gilley's last night. So it started off, and this was TJP, who returned to the promotion at the Melrose Ballroom tapings, which was in June, I think. And so TJP returned. He beat Ace Austin both nights of those tapings, which aired on 2 separate episodes in the last month. So he had an open challenge. It was an open X Division challenge. And the 3 people that answered the challenge were Willie Mack, Jake Christ, and Trey from the Rascals. And Willie Mack picked up the victory here with a 5-star frog splash. Now, very likely that could put Willie Mack in contention for the X Division Championship. His longtime ally, Rich Swann, currently the champion. So, could we potentially see a Willie Mack versus Rich Swann match for the X Division title? Those two actually met on Willie Mack's first night in the promotion. Willie Mack wanted to just show what he could do. And so he requested that he wrestle Rich Swann in his first match. They've also teamed together. So, and now that Rich Swann seems to be moving out of this program with Johnny Impact, more on that in a little bit. Could we get the next X Division Championship match being Rich Swann defending against Willie Mack? And Willie Mack's a guy who has won over a lot of people as of late. Tommy Dreamer is a big fan of Willie Mack. He put the House of Hardcore Twitch TV Championship on Willie Mack. Not sure if he still holds that title. House of Hardcore just sort of does scattered shows, it appears, now and then. But Tommy Dreamer, big fan of Willie Mack. Willie Mack was also the National Wrestling Alliance. Willie Mack won the National Heavyweight Championship for the National Wrestling Alliance. He did that earlier this year or at the 70th anniversary. Anyway, he lost that title to Colt Cabana, and there's some belief that his Lucha Underground contract was worrying to NWA. There is the belief that some from AAA's head office had sent out cease and desist orders to companies using some Lucha Underground guys. So Willie Mack doesn't appear to be affecting anything that he does with Impact Wrestling. He's certainly got a home there. He's done some appearances with MLW as well. This is a guy that's really all over the place right now. Now, he was a guy, WWE was going to bring him in. They were about ready to bring him in and sign him to developmental. Not sure what happened. And then all of a sudden, just noticing we got some questions. Not sure when the question about Bray Wyatt came in, but Bray Wyatt is backstage at Raw tonight. But he's been backstage for the last few shows. So we don't really know. They're in no rush to debut Wyatt because Wyatt's he's got there's so much buzz around what he's doing. So I'll go back to the questions in a second. Let me just run down Slammiversary, then we'll do some questions, then we'll do some news. So Willie Mack, yeah, I would watch for Willie Mack. WWE had him signed to a developmental deal. Then if you listen to Willie Mack tell it, they called him just before he was supposed to go report and said, don't bother coming in. You got a bum knee and you've got high blood pressure. So, but many have said that that's probably just an excuse WWE was using because they wanted somebody else instead. So it looks like their loss. Everybody else seems to really want Willie Mack, and he's doing well in Impact Wrestling. He could very well be the next person to challenge for the X Division Championship. Then in the second match, Guys, I was just talking about Josh Alexander and Ethan Page. They successfully retained their tag team championships match. And Santana went down. I didn't see what happened to Santana during this match, and they didn't show replays, but Conan was on the outside and threw up sort of his own red X. The doctors came out to look at him. It looked like they were looking at his knee. Whether this is part of storyline or whether he really hurt his knee, not clear. We know LAX's contracts could be coming up soon, coming up this summer. Well, the deals they signed are coming up this summer, and everybody wants to sign them, apparently. But Santana went down, that left Ortiz all on his own, and the North were able to pick up the victory. They had just won those titles at Bash at the Brewery, which was 2 nights before. And so now you've got the North as the tag team championships at a time where I think a lot of people are wondering where Santana and Ortiz go from here. Santana and Ortiz, they've main evented pay-per-views for Impact. They're the longest running tag champs in Impact history. They have more or less they've done all you can do in Impact. So you almost wonder if it's time for them to move on. We'll see. We'll just have to see. Then the third match, Eddie Edwards defeated Killer Kross. Kind of a cool moment in this match. Eddie Edwards, he's got his kendo stick named Kenny, and he gives the old "I love you, I'm sorry" to the kendo stick, a la Shawn Michaels, Ric Flair from WrestleMania, those years ago. And then he breaks the stick over his knee, shoves the kendo stick into Killer Kross's mouth. Then Killer Kross starts spitting out blood, and Eddie Edwards wins. I think that's a big win for Edwards. And that's sort of that was sort of a match where you could see the winner of it maybe moving into title contention as well. So unless Edwards and Killer Kross, I'm assuming this was the blow-off to their feud. Might not be. And a lot of people are suspecting that Killer Kross might not be long for the promotion either. He has been openly complaining about the contract that he signed. And so there are some that are speculating, he lost here on pay-per-view. Maybe he's out. And then the next match, Moose defeated Rob Van Dam. And Moose is someone who's really found himself over the last year. Moose lost the main event of Slammiversary last year to Austin Aries. I was at that show. And Moose is someone, he's a big athletic guy. Moose is someone where when you see him wrestle in person, he's way more impressive than when you see him on TV. Like in terms of his in-ring stuff. But I don't think Moose had many people talking about him up until this last year. And now he's like this new heel persona. So just to recap. So Moose was a babyface. Challenged Austin Aries at Slammiversary. Austin Aries beat him. And because it's Austin Aries, he cheated and used dirty, underhanded tactics. And Moose suffered a concussion in that match. He had to go to hospital. And then the storyline was the only person who checked up on Moose was Austin Aries. And then Austin Aries got into his head and taught him that the fans were, didn't have his best interests at heart and all this stuff. And then Moose just turned heel. At first he joined with Austin Aries. Him and Killer Kross were sort of like Austin Aries' henchmen. And then Aries left. And then Moose and Kross kind of went out on their own. And both of them have done really, really well. So Moose is transformed into this character who wears elaborate clothes, talks really cocky, and he seems like he's really found himself. Like he never seemed that comfortable with the microphone before. If you remember in Ring of Honor, he was managed by Veda Scott. He, I don't think he's ever really been a heel except for this last year. And this last year of being the cocky, arrogant heel, he has done so well. And easily, Moose could be back in the world title picture very soon. I mean, Moose versus Brian Cage for the Impact World Championship, that could be a pay-per-view main event. And then Moose beats Rob Van Dam here, and I think this might have surprised a few people because Rob Van Dam comes back. This is his first big match on pay-per-view, like if you don't count that first match back he had with Sabu. And so it seemed like you're spending all this money on Rob Van Dam. He's going to go over Moose, right? But this match was more about making Moose than I think people thought it would be going into it. And this was about Moose defeating a legend en route to becoming a legend himself. And of course, Moose is saying he's a legend already in his interviews, but that's what Moose's character would. But this win, I mean, really, it kind of solidifies Moose a little bit. I mean, because he's beaten a guy that is a top name in the minds of fans. Rob Van Dam. I mean, Rob Van Dam is pushing 50. Okay, so like we all know it's... But that doesn't really matter as much in wrestling. If you beat a guy, you beat a guy. And Moose beat Rob Van Dam. That, unless they're going to continue this thing with Rob Van Dam, which they might, which they easily could, this win over Rob Van Dam could catapult Moose into that world title picture. And if you look at Impact's top guys, you got Brian Cage, Michael Elgin, Moose, and now you got Rhino coming in. And those are some, like, that could be a fun heavyweight division. And I think Moose fits into that really, really nicely. And now he did cheat to beat Rob Van Dam. You know, they both brought chairs into it and stuff like that. But more or less, this was Moose with a clean victory over Rob Van Dam. I mean, it wasn't like a pull the trunks type of thing. He beat him with a spear. So, we'll see where it goes. Now, Impact, I think they're, like, next Friday's show is just a recap of Slammiversary, but we'll see. Monsters Ball was awesome. Monsters Ball match. So, Taya Valkyrie. So, Havoc had delivered a pile driver to, I think it was Su Yung. I'm almost certain it was Su Yung. Havoc delivered this pile driver to Su Yung, and it looked like, oh, nobody's getting up from this, but then Taya just chucked a chair at her face and then stole the pin. And it was a perfect kind of victory for Taya. And as her character has kept her championship at all costs. And we see that her thing on TV is that she'll only defend the title every 30 days and so on. And, you know, and this was a way for her to get away from Havoc, Su Yung, and Rosemary. She's beaten them all in one fell swoop. Now those three can go feud with each other. And Taya could move on to... Who knows? I think we could get Taya versus Tessa again. Because we had a trilogy of Taya versus Tessa matches last year. But they were all with Taya as the babyface and Tessa as the heel. So if they go back at it again, you got Tessa as the babyface and Taya as the heel. So it's a different dynamic. So you could do it again. And Tessa, I mean, seemingly getting her back in the mix for the Knockouts title is going to be sort of an easy move. Unless she's going to continue with intergender wrestling. Which she might. So Taya picks up the win there. And then in the sixth match, in the X Division Championship match, and there's some news to go along with this. Rich Swann picked up the clean victory over Johnny Impact. Won with a Phoenix Splash. And PW Insider, who... They have some things refuted, but it's usually their WWE stuff that's refuted. So PW Insider is reporting that Johnny Impact's contract with the company is done. I would be really surprised if that turns out to be fake news. He did lose clean last night, and if that's not true, I imagine Impact will correct it shortly, and they haven't so far. So, PW Insider reporting that Johnny Impact, his contract with the company has run out. That's all we know. I mean, he lost clean. He lost the title to Brian Cage, so he's had 2 big losses on pay-per-view. So it does sound like maybe they knew Johnny Impact is not going to re-sign. But Taya is still with Impact. Taya is still the Knockouts champion. And you would have to imagine Johnny and Taya will end up going, or would like to end up going to the same place. They might have also just decided, hey, it's time to give Johnny a little bit... Oh, by the way, wearing the Johnny Impact shirts just for this episode. They might have just decided that maybe it's time for Johnny to leave the territory for a bit. They decided that with the last champion, Austin Aries. I mean, there wasn't any actual problem. I'd be very surprised if there were any actual problems with Austin Aries and Impact Wrestling, but I think they decided it was just time for him to leave the territory for a bit. He'd been the champion, lost the belt. Kind of what do you do with a guy at that point? And that's the same position that Johnny Impact is in now. So the way that they can do things in Impact, and this would be a smart way to do it, is to kind of recycle guys a bit. And we're going to see in 2020, like, I mean, signing guys is all the rage right now because AEW has just entered the mix and they need to sign up a bunch of guys. But we're going to see over the next few years, wrestlers will start to want to go to the places that they think will push them. And we'll see. So you could see some guys who would be great mid-carders in AEW decide, well, maybe I could be a main eventer in MLW. You know, so it's not all cut and dry that the best guys or the best women or the best wrestlers are going to end up in the top promotions. I think you could see a lot of wrestlers decide, you know what? I could take that AEW contract or I could take this WWE contract, but I'd be pushed better, more heavily in Impact, MLW, or Ring of Honor. You will see people make those decisions. And it doesn't hurt that all 3 of those promotions, well, aside from MLW, have a company behind them with some dollars. MLW doesn't, that I know of, they don't have large financial backers. However, they're on beIN Sports. They got a good deal there, and they have been. And Court Bauer's got a great eye for talent. Is the other thing that promotion has going for them. But so take a Tessa Blanchard, whose contract is up this time next year. She signed a 2-year deal in June of 2018. So this time next year, Tessa Blanchard is the Kawhi Leonard of the pro wrestling free agency scene. Now, she's going to get a lot of money thrown into her by AEW, by WWE. She's going to be a very big commodity on the free agent market. And she'll probably take it because she hasn't had a big money contract at this point in her career. But say, she might decide, hey, if all things are equal, I'll stay in Impact because I don't know how I'm going to be pushing WWE. I don't know how I'm going to be pushing AEW. There's seemingly a little bit more room for advancement right now in AEW than there is WWE. But if in 2020 AEW's got a bunch of women wrestlers that they want as their top women wrestlers, Tessa Blanchard might just decide, you know what? Impact treats me like a superstar. If they also pay me like a superstar, I have no reason to leave. Now, in Johnny Impact's case, Johnny Impact, I mean, he's pushing 40. He'll want to grab a big money contract here. And so I think he'll be... I don't know. It'll depend on who's also willing to offer Taya a deal. But I think everybody who would be interested in Johnny would be interested in Taya too. But we're going to have some time with Johnny on the free agency market, with Taya not on the free agency market, which is interesting. Because Taya is the Knockouts champion. Johnny's just lost 2 big matches on pay-per-view, so Johnny's going away for a bit no matter what, but Taya's staying. I don't know. But anyway, Rich Swann beat Johnny Impact clean in the X Division title match at Slammiversary. Now, as I mentioned before, that could set up a Swann versus Willie Mack match. Lots of other X Divisions wrestlers who could be in the mix there. You know, TJP, Ace Austin. But Willie Mack won the Fatal 4-Way to open up Slammiversary. And Don Callis doesn't normally have people win matches if they're not going to move on to something bigger later. So I think very likely you could see Willie Mack challenge Rich Swann. That's not for sure. But Rich Swann picks up another X Division title defense, this time beating a former world champion clean on pay-per-view. Then the next match was for the Impact World Championship. Brian Cage defeated Michael Elgin. Now, at first I thought this might be a short match because there's been injury concerns around Brian Cage. And it seems like hasn't fully been right since the Rebellion pay-per-view when he won the title. So I thought they might just do something quick, and that's why Tessa versus Sammy was main eventing the show. Now I think that it was just Tessa versus Sammy main eventing because Tessa really... It gives that much more of a rub to Tessa. You know, they've got another year of Tessa. And now she's just main evented to paper. Although she lost, though, so there's that. But anyway, so Brian Cage defeated Michael Elgin. However, Michael Elgin kept a little bit strong here because it was a traditional pinning move that Brian Cage used to use Michael Elgin. So you could argue that these characters have unfinished business because Brian Cage and Michael Elgin are both big, strong guys, and the goal had been to overpower the other one and defeat them, not to, you know, hook the legs in a pinning combination and beat the guy with traditional mat wrestling. So that's what Brian Cage did. Then Elgin hits him with the belt after the match is over, so Cage is taken out. So Elgin's standing tall, lost the match, but standing tall at the end of the match. He's all pissed off because it was, you know, he lost the match via traditional roll-up. So goes, grabs Don Callis, is about to beat up Don Callis when a man who resembles Rhino quite a bit but is wearing a mask runs into the ring, delivers a gore to Michael Elgin, and then runs out of the ring. Seems like that was Rhino, but since Rhino mentioned in an interview recently that his WWE contract doesn't end until July 17th, hey, who knows if that was really Rhino or not, right? But let's assume it was Rhino. That means we're getting Rhino versus Michael Elgin. And first of all, what a great pickup for Impact. Look, Impact Wrestling has so many guys from ECW involved in it. Lance Storm and Tommy Dreamer both worked backstage. Don Callis is at the head of it. You got Rob Van Dam. You got Sabu wrestles a few matches. The Sandman's been in there. I'm fine with Impact saying, you know what? Since ECW didn't live on, we're going to carry on some of the lineage. And we're going to use ECW legends as our legends. I'm fine with that. Because ECW was awesome. So why not? So Rhino is only 43 years old. That's not old anymore. 43 now is what 33 used to be. So Rhino, you can put him in there. You can put him in the main event. Again, you've got a heavyweight division with Rhino, Michael Elgin, Brian Cage, and Moose. And you can even put Rob Van Dam in there. Killer Cross. Sami Callihan. What the hell? Just throw Sami Callihan in the World Championship pick. There's been a bunch of good pickups for Impact Wrestling. And Rhino is a fantastic pickup. Michael Elgin's a big pickup too, because he has a lot of credibility from the stuff that he did in New Japan. Former Ring of Honor World Champion, and is a really, really, really good wrestler. The social media hate wagon does not like him. It's not clear what that is worth, however. It's not. Like, the social media hate train hated Rich Swann. Wanted to convince Rich Swann to retire. Nobody hates Rich. Like, the people that know Rich Swann, nobody dislikes him. There was a weird situation. Nobody knows what happened. Okay. But the social media hate train wanted everybody to hate Rich Swann because there was a police report that said he had... Yeah, I'm not even going to go into it. But police reports are wrong. I think, and I could be wrong about this. My math could be wrong, but I believe police reports are incorrect 100% of the time. 100% of the time. So why we decided to believe them about Rich Swann? It's just people wanted to hate. People wanted to hate. But Michael Elgin's a great pickup for Impact Wrestling because he can have fantastic wrestling matches with guys like Brian Cage, Moose, Killer Cross. Well, Killer Cross is still really new, but I bet you a Michael Elgin Killer Cross match would be really good. Like, that was the knock on Killer Cross that you would hear Conan say. It's like, but this was a couple of years ago. Like, he's great. He's got everything, but he's a little green. I don't know if people... Like, it's been a few years since Conan... That was Conan's knock on him. It's been like 1 or 2 years. And it seems like... I don't know. His matches seem fine to me. And there's been no reports that he's hurt anybody. So... But yeah. Lots of good stuff in the heavyweight division of Impact Wrestling. And then the main event last night, Sami Callihan defeated Tessa Blanchard. So there's a bunch of stuff to talk about in this. One, it felt like Tessa Blanchard could have won that match. Like, I don't have an opinion on intergender wrestling, right? Like, wrestling is whatever you want it to be. My point that I make a lot is that a trained woman fighter can beat a trained male fighter with if they have a size advantage. Like, if you put Cyborg or Amanda Nunes in the octagon with Demetrius Johnson, who do you take? Okay, so like, give Amanda Nunes 20 pounds on Henry Cejudo. If Amanda Nunes punches Henry Cejudo in the face, he's going to get knocked out. Right? So I don't, and like Cyborg, you put Cyborg in the cage against like a piss poor male fighter at 125 pounds. He's a trained fighter, but let's call him just like barely good enough to be professional. And Cyborg at 145, Cyborg will beat that male at 125, right? So this whole idea that or at least I think so. I don't know. I would like to see some intergender MMA with like a 20-pound weight discrepancy where the woman has a 20-pound advantage. I don't know if the man is winning that fight. Right? I don't know. But, like, I just don't think it's so cut and dry. Like, I'm not against intergender wrestling, unless it's done really stupid. But, like, if you look at, like, Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat or all these video games, it was all intergender. Nobody cared. Nobody thought it was... Like, it wasn't a big deal when Jazz was wrestling men in ECW. But, on the other hand, like, I get it. Wrestling... I get when people are against intergender wrestling because you don't have intergender combat sports in real competition. So I get why people don't like it. Like, if wrestling is a fictionalized combat sport and there's no intergender competition in combat sports, then there shouldn't be intergender wrestling. I get that. And if that's your view of wrestling, then that's totally understandable. I'm just saying, like, you can also have a Lucha Underground version of wrestling where it's all like Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat or comic books and stuff, where it's just different, right? And, like, I'm fine with either, to tell you the truth. But I thought Sami Callihan and Tessa Blanchard was a very excellent intergender match. I won't call it the best intergender match I ever saw because I saw Matt Riddle face Mia Yim live for Smash Wrestling, and that was fucking amazing. Ugh, I hope I can swear on YouTube. Well, I just did, so we'll see what happens. But there was a few things. One, Sami Callihan doesn't look like an athletic beast of a wrestler. Neither does Tessa Blanchard, really, but Tessa Blanchard wrestles such an aggressive style that when they got going, I believed that what Tessa Blanchard was doing to Sami Callihan hurt Sami Callihan, and everything Sami Callihan did to Tessa Blanchard looked like it was destroying Tessa Blanchard. I thought it was incredible. I thought Tessa Blanchard could have won. Like, I thought she could have won, and you could have ended the pay-per-view with this, "Can you believe what we witnessed?" Yada, yada, yada. And just on a side note, Sami Callihan is one of the surprisingly progressive wrestlers in the world. Like, he's standing up for, you know, what he believes to be uninclusive talk from commentators. He's, you know, putting over women. Well, he won the match, but he definitely made Tessa Blanchard look like someone who can beat the crap out of guys at his level. You know, Sami Callihan's an odd guy to get your finger on because, like, from one perspective, he almost killed Eddie Edwards last year. Like, and then you know, he's just an interesting guy. He's always making news because he's saying something controversial, doing something controversial, and then got in all this trouble with MLW recently. But anyway, he won with a cactus driver, pile driver, and then after the match, he showed Tessa respect by handing her back her bat and things like this. I thought it was great. You know, they could have ended the pay-per-view with Cage versus Elgin, and then you've got Rhino's appearance as the big surprise thing. But they decided to go with this match sort of making history. And, man, Tessa Blanchard and Sami Callihan, you know, both of those two have really, like, they've been on all the pay-per-views in this era of Impact Wrestling, and they've kicked ass on all of them. They've been two of the promotion's most valuable players in the last year and a half, minus Brian Cage almost blinding and killing Eddie Edwards. Or Sami Callihan doing that, I mean. And this was their chance to main event a pay-per-view, and they killed it. I think this was the most important match of each of their careers, and I think they both did amazing. And you can't discount the contribution that both of them have made to this promotion over the last year. Tessa Blanchard's contract is up in a year, and she is going to garner a lot of money. Man, she's earned it. She is my favorite female wrestler to watch right now. Wrestling's subjective, so you can't rank them. But if you said, like, what female wrestler... Well, she's one of my favorite wrestlers. But if you said, what female wrestler would you want to go see a match of more than anyone else's right now? It'd be Tessa Blanchard, for sure. For sure. Who else is up there? I mean, a lot of the top names are in WWE, which, you know, well, whatever. But anyway, Tessa Blanchard, good. So that's where we're going on that one. All right, but let's talk about New Japan Pro Wrestling. They held the first night of the G1 Climax 29 tournament on Saturday, and this was at the American Airlines Center. And unfortunately, the first thing I got to talk about is the live crowd was not great. And actually, let's see if we can see if the live figures are available just yet. I don't think they will be. Okay, let's just go to the main cage match page. If you guys don't know, my favorite wrestling website is cagematch.net. It's a German site, and the translations don't always match up tremendously, but it's great if you love stats. Okay, so they had 4,846 in the American Airlines Center last night. That's not bad. However, the American Airlines Center, that's an NBA, like the Dallas Mavericks play there. I think the Dallas Stars play there. And so American Airlines Center, let's just see. So Raw on Monday was at the American Airlines Center, and the live crowd is not listed. I did hear they got over 10,000 for that show. Now that is Paul Heyman's first Raw, so I think there was some real interest there. But, you know, they did draw under 5,000 in a venue which can hold like at least 18,000. I know they sectioned it off, but I feel like they were expecting a bigger crowd there. They did announce a tour for September. Interesting enough, they're not joining up with Ring of Honor for this tour, and they're going to, I believe, Lowell, Philly, and New York. So they're going to, and they're running traditional wrestling venues there. I don't have this in front of me, but I believe they're running the 2300. I believe they are. So New Japan in the 2300 arena. That's interesting. But under 5,000 for the show. It looked weaker though, didn't it? Like it looked like there were a lot of empty seats. I mean, hearing that they almost drew 5,000, I mean, that's pretty good. So anyway, let's run down what happened. We'll just skip the preliminary matches. I just watched the tournament matches. So Lance Archer. Let's talk about Lance Archer versus Will Ospreay. Lance Archer, holy bleep. He really came into this looking like he has been in the gym since we last saw him. Has like a big red mohawk, and had a tremendous match with Will Ospreay. So I did not think that Archer, like if you look at Block A, Archer looked like someone who was going to take a lot of losses. Because if you look at Block A, there's a lot of talent in Block A. Like in Block B, you got Yano, Taichi, and some guys that can lose. In Block A, I was thinking, God, I mean, like Lance Archer is sort of your guy who can lose. Bad Luck Fale can lose, but he's usually getting disqualified. So this was, I mean, they did everything in this match. They were kicking out of finishers. They were doing super finishers. And Lance Archer picked up the victory. And so gains 2 points, goes over Will Ospreay. And this also puts Ospreay in a chance now. I mean, Ospreay's always best coming from behind, right? So you put him in the underdog spot. You know what? I got the schedule up here. So who does Will Ospreay? If you go on SpoilerFreeWrestling.com, I've got the whole schedule up. So okay, so Will Ospreay faces Sonata next, so he can beat Sonata. And Lance Archer faces Bad Luck Fale next. So Lance Archer versus Bad Luck Fale. That'll be a good match. That's on night 3. So you kind of have to ask yourself now, instead of Lance Archer being the guy at the bottom for Block A, is this the start of something new for Lance Archer? Davey Boy Smith Jr. is gone from New Japan. From what I've heard, he quit. He's got a 2-year deal with MLW. And so Killer Elite Squad is done. This leaves Lance Archer without a partner and now competing in the G1 for the first time, I think, since 2014. Comes in with a new look and immediately gets a victory over a guy with a very notable name, especially in the States, Will Ospreay. Also should be noticed, Archer is from Texas. He won with the Claw. Of course, made famous by the Von Erich family in the area. So Lance Archer wins with the Claw in his hometown of Dallas to kick off the G1 Climax 29. That's got to be a big moment for him. And so we'll see where Lance Archer goes from here. He could be in line to sort of move up the rankings in New Japan. Bad Luck Fale defeated Evil. Fale only got 6 points in the tournament last year and was disqualified in every other match. So he won 3 and was disqualified in 6. So Bad Luck Fale now with 2 points over Evil. Sonata scored a pinning combination over Zack Sabre Jr., and so that was interesting because normally in these matches you've got Zack Sabre Jr. He's doing all these submission moves or clever pinning combinations. Of course, Sonata does a little bit of that as well. I don't think Sonata was ever able to get the Paradise Lock in during the match. He certainly went for it a bunch of times, but it was a pinning combination that Sonata used to pick up the win over Zack Sabre Jr. So you've got 3 different type matches already in the G1. Like Lance Archer versus Will Ospreay was this epic, kick out of everything, big move match. Fale and Evil was, short, involved some, stuff done behind the ref's back, a lot of cheating and kind of, definitely not the athletic display that was in the first match. And then Sonata and Zack Sabre Jr. is a very technical display, with Sonata winning with a pinning combination to get 2 points. Then the next match, Kenta and Kota Ibushi. And this was really important for Kenta to pick up the victory here. He did. Kenta, of course, he's said a lot in the build-up to this G1 about how now this run for him in New Japan is really important. He's 38 or 39 years old. He wrestled in Pro Wrestling Noah from 2000 to 2014, built up a name, a fantastic reputation, then goes to NXT, and things just didn't work out for him. He he suffered from a lot of injuries, which took him out of things at key times. Then he went up to 205 Live, and that was always going to be a problem. Just on account of nobody who goes to 205 Live comes out better for it. And he had said at the pre-match press conference and all this stuff, if this doesn't work out, maybe I'm done. But he also said, I want to show the world Kenta, not Hideo Itami. And when I left Japan, when I was with Pro Wrestling Noah, New Japan wasn't the global company that it is now. Now New Japan is global, so New Japan represents an opportunity. And this is what he said more or less. New Japan represents an opportunity for him to show Kenta on the global stage. Well, this was Kenta's first match in the G1, and he beat Kota Ibushi in a very key match in the semi-main event. And then the main event, and you had Kazuchika Okada versus Hiroshi Tanahashi. This is traditionally the biggest match New Japan can present, the most storied rivalry of New Japan's history. And it's funny because if you go back a year ago, New Japan did a show in the Cow Palace around this time last year. And again, it wasn't really there were empty seats there again. Kenny Omega even mentioned that in his post-match press conference. And that night was geared all around the Elite. And it was the night that Tama Tonga and the Firing Squad turned on the Elite. And there were some complaints from traditional New Japan fans around that time, well, all that year, about the Elite ruining New Japan. Now, I don't think that, but like people were saying that. And I don't think you can doubt that like New Japan was a lot different when Kenny Omega was at the top. The Young Bucks were the heavyweight tag champs. And some people have a very negative reaction to the Elite, kind of because they feel they're silly. You know, the Elite do have a silly approach to wrestling, right? Like sillier than New Japan's. Like AEW, while it's been great so far, I've got no complaints about AEW. But, you know, some of the stuff's a little silly. Like the whole premise of Fyter Fest was silly. The librarian thing is silly. You know, and a lot of people felt like, look, this just doesn't fit New Japan. And if we're going to bring New Japan to the United States, we need to show traditional New Japan. Not try and be the American style of wrestling. And that's what you got on the G1 special on Saturday. This was a traditional New Japan show, a G1 show done no differently than if they had held this show in Korakuen Hall. The prelim matches all set up next tournament matches. Well, except for the GOD versus Sho and Yo. You know, everything was the same there. And then you put Okada and Tanahashi in the main event. And if you run through previous New Japan events held in the United States, they'd always thrown an American kind of guy in there, right? And here you had a show which was traditional New Japan. And it drew just as well as a show that they did in the Cow Palace in in California last year with the Elite on top. In each case, you had empty seats. But this time they presented a traditional New Japan show, and it's clear that that is the direction they're moving in, because if your goal is to present a traditional New Japan G1 show, yeah, Okada versus Tanahashi in the main event, that's, you know, you're presenting traditional New Japan wrestling to the American audience. So next up, they don't do a show again until next weekend because they're back in Japan. And then they've got shows on the 13th, 14th, 15th. They got 2 shows in Ota City and then a show in Sapporo before taking a couple of nights off and then being back in Korakuen Hall in Japan. So next up is night 2. Juice Robinson versus Shingo Takagi. Jon Moxley will make his G1 debut. He'll wrestle Taichi. Tetsuya Naito versus Toru Yano. Jeff Cobb versus Tomohiro Ishii. And then Hiroki Goto versus Jay White. So that was Slammiversary. And that was the G1. And we also went over Slammiversary. And that's going to do it, I think, for this live stream. I'm kind of tired. Actually, no, let's quickly run down. Tonight's Raw is from the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey. 2 matches have been announced so far. Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch will join forces to take on Andrade and Zelina Vega in an intergender match. Also, Roman Reigns and a partner of his choosing will go up against Shane McMahon and Drew McIntyre. Thanks so much, everybody, for supporting this live stream. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any news or reports from Spoiler Free Wrestling.